Back in the day, people made a number of fun little concepts for a Sans Pacifist battle in Undertale. So in this video, I'd like to take that same idea, update it, and port it over to Deltarune. Why not? It's the same Sans anyway. To get started, if I had to place this concept in the actual game, I'd put it in chapter 4 or 5. Not 3, because the setup just doesn't allow for it, and I imagine 6 and 7 are when things are gonna get real. The setup for the fight would go something like this. Sans and Papyrus end up in the Dark World with the Fun Gang, Sans probably not showing himself until a little while into the adventure. Shenanigans occur, and Papyrus ends up joining the big bad of the chapter, Sans obviously following him. Then, acting somewhat as guards or sentries, they both essentially fall back into their Undertale roles, but as more of a game this time, because that's what Papyrus sees this as. Probably about halfway through the chapter, or maybe even leading up to the end, Papyrus needs more time to get some big, probably anticlimactic plan together. So, he sicks Sans on the Fun Gang. Battles start. The first attack is a single, short bone crawling across the bottom of the box. You're not even blue. If you intentionally run into it, it deals 1 damage with no karma poisoning and invincibility frames perfectly intact. Whenever you heal or otherwise fail to progress the fight, he does essentially the same attack, but maybe a little faster, or even with 2 whole bones if you're lucky. If you try to hit him, he won't dodge per se, but you'll always miss. Sometimes a ridiculously unlikely object will fall from the sky just in time to block the attack, like a lawn chair, a clump of snow, or a really big hot dog. Sometimes he'll even accidentally dodge by bending down to tie his slippers or something. And if you want to get really interesting, perhaps the Devil's Knife or the Puppet Scarf actually refuse to hit him, missing on purpose. You can pacify Sans at any time by putting him to sleep with Ralsei's lullaby. In the overworld, he'll just stand there asleep, and you can walk right by him into the next room. Or, so you think. Leaving the room actually just loops you back around to the start, and when you reach Sans again, he's awake and the battle resumes right where you left off. If you do this multiple times, he does a self-parody of his expression reading thing from Undertale. And if you're extremely persistent and keep going for a few rounds even after he stops saying new stuff, you can entirely skip the fight. But beyond that, the only way to progress is by selecting Cool Move in the Act menu, where the respective character strikes a pose, does a trick with their weapon, or showcases a dumb talent. The act is more for Papyrus than Sans, the flavor text always describing him in the distance having some reaction to the moves. But at the same time, it also triggers Sans to start sloppily spelling out a message in bones through the battle box a couple words at a time. After a number of rounds, the less than polished message ends up being, "Psst, hey, I'm gonna do some oathing. Just play along. Paps will love it, trust me." Then, after skipping a turn to build suspense, Sans lazily raises his hand to the sky, summoning his Smash Bros. Gaster Blaster arm cannon. Pointing it at the Fun Gang, the blaster does a flashy charge-up, motes of white light surging into the mouth of the skull, for a couple seconds too long. Then, he fires a horribly off-target beam completely above the battle box. But then you hear it reflect off something, and it rockets back on screen, bouncing off the edges of the game window, violently shaking everything until eventually it hits Susie squarely in the eyes. Naturally, it only does 1 damage, but blinded, she reflexively starts punching around wildly, accidentally socking Kris in the face. They stumble backward and fall on top of Ralsei. Lumbering toward the noise, Susie trips over the 2 of them and joins the pile, thoroughly squishing the goat. The battle ends, and before Sans can say anything, Papyrus runs in, really impressed with Sans' victory and ready to progress with his plan. He dares the Fun Gang to enter the next room, them still lying in a heap, heyheying as he dashes away. Sans lingers for a second to say, "Nice going." Then, with a wink adding, "That almost looked real," before strolling off screen. Though if we're being honest here, none of this would actually happen. He'd just put a piece of paper on the ground that says, "Wait here."